All right, so let's go ahead and move into our next point. So this one isn't necessarily new to 10th edition. It's always been, as far as I know, in Warhammer 40K. But to us, this is something new. So I guess, we could have come to other editions too because of this. But just kind of the way that Warhammer treats Horde armies versus Elite armies. So, like, take your Orcs versus your Custodes. That's just like the way that it's done. If you haven't really played other war games, you might not realize how well it's done in Warhammer 40K versus other games. So when I talk about this, I think the main factor that dictates the way that a Horde army versus Elite army plays is really kind of done in the activation order. So in Warhammer 40K, it's a you go then I go style game. But in other games, which people have talked about Warhammer maybe going into this, but I think it's a mistake. But the alternating activation, which is how Star Wars Legion is, it doesn't work as well for a Horde army. And do you want to go ahead and explain that a little bit, Brooke?
Yeah, I think the you go I go thematically benefits the Horde versus Elite so much better. And to elaborate on the Legion example, there's the faction of the CIS and Separatists, and they have tons of droids. And if you ever watch Clone Wars, and they're supposed to be this overwhelming force that they just have sheer numbers, and they just push up the board as this, lines of droids. But in practice, it doesn't really act like that. It's per unit you get two extra models, and you can't give them too many activations because in a game like Star Wars Legion, activations matter tremendously when it comes to objective play. But in a game like 40K, while having more units is good so that you can run different objectives, it's not the thing that makes or breaks a list. If Drew is running a list of orcs and he has 12 activations, and I'm running Space Wolves and I have 7, we are still going to be able to play the game and have a balanced game. Whereas if I was playing Legion and I have a list that has 11 activations and Drew has one that has 8, those are not balanced, most likely, unless you have like a very specific build. But most likely those are not balanced, and that's not a huge disparity in the number of lists, in the number of activations in a list.
And
But that 1 to 2 extra activations adds up when it's a I go with one unit and then you go with one unit. And then at the end of your turn, when you're done activating all of your units and I have 3 more, I get to activate with 3 of my units and do stuff without any repercussions based on what you're going to do on your turn, because you can't react to my 3 effectively free activations.
yeah, I guess just imagine a game where everybody plays like Custodes. Like, as soon as you lose a few units, you get super cagey and just try to peel off units from the enemy rather than, just playing your game and having fun. So
Yeah, I
that's
think that's actually a super good point, because like in a game like Legion where every activation matters, in a game like 40K where it's you go I go, and you play a horde army, if you lose a unit, like Drew, if you're playing orcs and you lose a unit of boys, you're probably not that hurt, because you're just like, oh, it's just a boys unit. I have 3 more in my list, and you can still shove your entire list in my face, and it's still going to be just as effective. Maybe not just. I mean, it'll have, obviously you're missing a unit of boys, but you're still going to be able to do what your list wants to do, as opposed to if you lose a key unit. If you lose a unit in Legion, it is a huge detriment to just running objectives, and it can make or break the entire game.
and one last thing I think I want to highlight is just that the way in a uh, alternating activation game is balanced, it's typically just by making the units really, really weak. So with CIS, with the B1s, the basic droids that are from the Phantom Menace, they suck. They're just really bad. They're maybe good for running an objective, but like it doesn't take long for you to lose. Like if you don't even necessarily need to target them in Star Wars Legion because they're so bad. You're just like whatever, you can do your thing. You're probably not going to do that much to me. But that's how it's balanced. They make their horde like battle line units garbage, but like with orcs, Brooke was saying, you know, like if I have a unit of boys, I can still do work. If I had a unit of 10 boys hop out of a truck with like a war boss attached to it, Brooke with his base wolves is going to be pretty fearful of that untouched unit of boys. It's not something that can just be ignored. He may have peeled off my other unit of boys, but I still have another one in his face, and I could just completely wipe out that unit because it's just that's kind of how an overwhelming force would play. Like, I took out this entire unit of boys, but there's another one. You know, it's the green tide. I'm being washed over by this green tide of orcs. It's just so much more thematic to the game, and it just gives you so many more interesting strategic choices in how you want to play the game instead of just you pay attention to the activation count of you versus your opponent. If I'm down an act, I need to start playing cagey. It's just like it becomes very predictable on how people are going to play the game, and it's a lot less fun.
Yeah, I think we can't really discount the theme of a green tide versus a small band of Space Marines on the table. It's a very cool thing to be able to do, where you read about this in books or you see it in, you know, somebody's lore YouTube video where they're talking about some event that happened, and you get to kind of reenact that in a way where you have a quote unquote lore accurate battle going on. It's a ton of fun. I think that is something that we can't really discount is how the Horde versus Elite accommodates the lore aspect of every faction.
You just listened to a clip from Inwarp Mag. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our full podcast episodes right here on our channel. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to our podcast or to listen to more of our awesome clips.